Welcome to the first episode of the Transformation Blueprint.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So today we've got Teru Ikogho. Teru is an HR transformation leader who works across global transformation, M&A integration, focused on turning strategy into delivery that actually works in practice, designs operating models, leads change, stays accountable for outcomes beyond the strategy stage, where most transformations succeed or fail, which we'll get into a bit more detail around. But even more impressive, Teru also brings a strong focus on neurodiversity, psychological safety, inclusion, and how diverse thinking can better be used to improve performance, decision-making in complex, fast-changing environments, which probably doesn't do you justice in terms of the introduction. But over to you to kind of introduce yourself as well.
So you've covered pretty much all of it. I guess I'm just very passionate about change, not just in terms of what we're trying to do and by when, but also making sure people actually understand what we're asking them to do differently. I think a lot of the times people forget that change is a verb. It requires you to do something differently. And that's not just on leadership, that's on every single person that change touches. I think HR people and change professionals in general have a job to make sure that what's presented is clear. But understanding that clarity actually is something that everybody needs to take responsibility for.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when did your change kind of / transformation journey start, should I say? Was there always an interest there, or?
That's a really good question. I think the first transformation that I went on actually was transforming myself. Before I even managed to start my career, actually, I'd gone through several iterations of transformation. I think my existence is a little bit complex. I was raised by I'm a first generation immigrant. My parents grew up in Nigeria. My dad was literally born in the 50s. My dad's experienced black and white television in Nigeria. Then there's me, born in the UK. There are lots of differences in the worlds that me and my parents even came from. So I think understanding change and transformation is almost intuitive to me because I've had to do it with my family members. The geography that I live in, before I even reached the world of work, I had to work out where somebody else was coming from in my parents and to be able to communicate with them clearly, because sometimes even between us, we have very different definitions of respect, care. So I think just understanding where somebody else is coming from has always been something that I'm very good at naturally, because I've had to do it with my own family from the day that I was born.
Okay, that really resonates, right? I think very, very similar story, just in terms of my background. And I think that initial kind of finding your feet phase when you're a kid, it is more about just kind of identity. And a lot of that is, does my face fit at the time? That's certainly how I felt. But just in terms of some of the other stuff that you're really passionate about, just from a neurodiversity perspective, was that also something that you were kind of looking at as a kid and kind of feeling like alongside the identity piece that you felt there might be other things that are slightly, in inverted commas, different from some of the other children, etc.? When did that journey kind of start, when you developed a deep understanding?
Very, very, very young.
Okay.
So I grew up in a very, very not diverse area. I grew up in the Midlands, in a small village called Dunchurch, near Rugby, and I was always different. I was often the only black person in the room. And I think having that experience so young helped me to understand that a lot of people don't really know how to take difference. Difference isn't necessarily a bad thing. There's no two people are the same. Even us, we're both Nigerian. We're two very different people still. I think just understanding that some people fear difference helped me to not personalize it too much. For me, my life has all been about bridging connection with people who are different to me and giving people the chance to show up for me. I tend to not judge people based on their first reactions. I tend to judge people based on their second reactions, which tends to be what they're actually like versus their conditioning. I try to not judge people based on their conditioning because you don't know what you don't know. I don't think fear of difference makes you a bad person. I think it makes you human. And if the goal is connection, then pathologizing people and punishing people for not having the greatest initial reaction doesn't actually help us get there. So for me, it's just my whole life has been a story of trying to understand where someone's coming from and to actively help them to understand where I'm coming from. Maybe because they haven't met a person like me before. It doesn't automatically mean you're a bad person. It just means you're a human experiencing change.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we all know there's a resistance to change, right, in corporate organisations, and there's, for the most part. So how critical has that skill set been for you in terms of driving transformation?
I can't even tell you how important it's been. I think it's the single most important thing. And I think that's what makes me so effective in the work that I've done, is actually actively leaning into the feelings that people have. I don't know if you've watched the show Severance at all.
I have, but
you didn't necessarily like it. But I found the concept really interesting, especially as a HR professional. I think in some ways people are expected to not have a personal life when they're at work, and when they're at work to not think about the personal life. But really, we're all human beings, and we all have lives, and we all have people around us who are also going through changes at the same time. I think my approach to delivery has always been remembering that people are people with emotions, and it doesn't mean you're immature or that you're incapable because you feel fear, and that fear impacts your actions. It just means that you're human. And I think the best leaders lean into that and actively try and do something with the emotions that people are feeling. I think in M&A in particular is where you really see this come to life. My role as a HR people M&A transformation leader is to make sure that those fears don't distract us from value realization. And oftentimes those fears are around, am I going to have a job? Am I going to have a place? Essentially in M&A, you're working for a new company overnight that you never applied to, with a different culture, with a different context, with a different set of people that you don't know yet. That's fundamentally very scary. And I think I see it sometimes, and I'm always reminding my peers of this, just because this is our bread and butter, we live and breathe this, that this feels like nothing to us. It is a very big change for a lot of people to experience. So it's not useful for us to act like they're being immature for being scared. Actually, they're being human, and we should lean into understanding why they feel that fear, and we should tell them the things that we can tell them to help alleviate those fears wherever we can. I think for me, I believe it or not, I only found out I'm neurodivergent about a year and a half ago. It's very common for people like me to be diagnosed later in life, especially women, especially people who are seen as very good at navigating social situations, which actually, in hindsight, I realise was actually through extreme practice and research and active effort. It isn't something that comes naturally to me, even if it seems natural in the way that I come across to people. So for me, I've even had to deal with an insane identity shift myself in the last year, whilst in a really demanding job, finding out you're actually autistic and dyslexic, and you should have had all of this extra accommodation and support this whole time that you didn't have. And having to lean into that change, because autism is an invisible disability. It is a disability, in part because so few people understand it, and they see that difference as something sometimes a little bit scary to lean into, that somebody's mind works in a different way to theirs. But I found that most people, when you sit down and talk to them or you share information, they do understand. You just have to give them a little bit of time and patience. I apply that same way of thinking to my job. M&A, yes, it does feel like it happens overnight, but giving people enough time and space to sit with fundamentally different information. I haven't ever worked on an M&A deal in my 7 years in this work that people haven't got there. You just have to give them enough time and information and the safety to go through that change curve. And I find when you do give them that time and space, they get there quite quickly, actually.
Okay. That's super interesting. And actually, I want to touch upon the M&A piece, but also kind of like segue into the AI coming into the equation now, and that kind of like AI versus human piece, for sure. Just given a lot of what you're saying is around feeling and understanding, emotional awareness, etc. But I want to take a step back just in terms of when you found out you were neurodivergent, because you come across as a really resilient, bubbly, really energetic person. How much of kind of like not knowing or going undiagnosed, as you mentioned, how much has that kind of contributed to just like your resilience as a person, as a human?
I think in hindsight, hugely. I think now knowing that I have been autistic and dyslexic this whole time, I just have a huge sense of pride.
Yeah.
And it also makes me realise that there's no such thing as impossible. Like, I managed to get straight A's at school even when I didn't have the extra time that I needed. And that's no small feat. I think when you realise how challenging the journey that you've been walking has actually been, it makes you realise there's no challenge that you can't overcome. I think as well, of course, there are challenges that come with neurodivergence, but I'm reminded that everything has duality. The things that are really, really hard and difficult about that existence, on the other side, there are all these unique strengths that you can lean into, and they're equally as brilliant. You know, there's almost like a push and pull with it all. I think as well, the fact that I didn't know didn't mean that I wasn't. I think sometimes people miss. So I got diagnosed when I was 29, just about to turn 31 now. There's a lot that you learn as you get older. And I think the fact that I found out when I'm older meant that I was more confident. There was a stronger foundation for me to deal with that change if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think there's one book that I read when I was in my early 20s. It's The Defining Decade, Why Your 20s Matter and How to Make the Most of Them Now. It's by Meg Jay. She's a psychologist. She talks about all of the 20-somethings that come through her office, the things that they're grappling with and the things that they're worrying about. And I just think there isn't a single person in this world that hasn't had to be resilient in some type of way. I find it's not really useful to compare how hard different people's lives are. Some people might think that the journey that I've gone on is so hard and they can't imagine navigating it, but I don't think I've ever met a person that isn't dealing with something hard. And what was great about this book is she talks about the resilience that's built over time, for just leaning into feeling the fear and doing it anyway, again and again and again, and that you realise then that your comfort zone is much bigger. I think another thing as well in this book that really stuck with me in my early 20s was the impacts of compounding, and that a decision that you make later isn't always a better decision. She talks about that mainly in the context of family planning, but with that, it just made me not worry about making the right decisions each and every time, and knowing that when I'm thrown curveballs, they're not impossible to get over. She talks about that a lot in this book, and I think that reading this book so early in my 20s, I think helped me to not worry too much about doing the exact perfect thing at the exact perfect time. So when these massive curveballs come at me, such as finding out I've been neurodivergent this whole time without knowing, it didn't faze me as much because I recognise life is all about the ups and downs. You don't know what you don't know. And I just think I'm really happy to know now about my neurodivergence because I've been able to accommodate myself.
Absolutely.
And I can tell people, hey, I'm actually neurodivergent, which might mean this, this and this. And it would really help if you would be able to talk to me in this, this and this way. And I find that misunderstandings in communication have reduced. I also think when I'm sharing with people that I am neurodivergent, people worry a lot about saying the wrong thing. But I think as people, everybody knows when somebody has good intentions. And I have seen nothing but good intentions throughout the majority of my career, actually. Those bad moments that we focus on a lot, they're actually quite infrequent. And I find that when somebody does maybe say the wrong thing in regards to neurodivergence, they always react really well to a nice, gentle correction too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's a great perspective for sure. I think there's a lot of scenarios, certainly on our side of the fence, with what we do, where you have to almost be quite conscious and cautious around a lot of the things we say, right? Because some of our interactions are short, they're sharp, and you're almost slightly weary at times when people give you certain pieces of information around saying the wrong thing, and you can quickly tarnish a relationship on our side of the fence. But I think your perspective is great, right? Just in terms of how you kind of like process these things and how you go about building these relationships and giving people the benefit of the doubt, which is something that you mentioned. The bit I wanted to talk about also was that kind of just like AI coming into the workplace, right? It's definitely going to change how we work. It's going to automate a lot of processes. I think transformation is certainly going to be affected by it. I think the first iteration will be AI transformation, but then also utilizing AI within those kind of like transformation teams and processes, etc. Talk to me a bit about that, your thoughts and feelings around that, given that a lot of what you have mentioned is around kind of like feeling and developing an understanding, etc. What are your thoughts on AI and how they might increase bias for neurodivergent people?
Yes. Okay. So I do think a lot about some of the risks that come with AI, but I'm also reminded, again, everything has duality. There are a lot of opportunities with AI. I think AI adoption in itself doesn't mean that bias has to get worse. It could mean that bias gets a little bit better because now you can use AI to show you your blind spots. I use that a lot, especially when I'm writing policy, is thinking about what are the blind spots here? What's this missing? What additional context might we not be considering here? How might this land in 10 years' time? You can use AI to flesh out things that you've missed and to make things a little bit better. But there still is something to be concerned about there, right? AI has essentially been trained on the whole history of the internet that anyone's ever written. we know that bias exists in that data set that it's been fed. So something that I do, and I think everybody should practice, is just noticing where bias might be. In some of these books, for example, Fortitude, in this one, you notice sometimes the author's point of view bleeding through in a few areas. And I think just taking the time to actively think about what might be missing here, actively think about what are the limitations of AI. I think in a lot of places right now, what we actually have is large language models. When you actually understand how they work, you know that you can't just blindly trust its outputs. So I think everybody just needs to be a little bit more discerning. And if anything, that discernment is where humans have an edge, because AI isn't discerning as of today as much as I can see. So that human discernment actually, I think, becomes even more important, not just in analysing the outputs of AI, but also analysing what might be missing.
Okay. And what's your journey so far with AI? Might I ask?
I am in my beginner phase, as is everybody. I think I've just been playing around with it. I've been building it. I think in my last role as well, I was tasked with building AI into most of our process workflows. So thinking about the strengths of AI and the limitations as well has been a big one for me. Right now, I'm trying to switch over from ChatGPT to Claude because I want to understand Claude projects. I'm very much in my beginner phase there too. But I think it's really cool to just play around with it and understand what the technology even is. And I'm always reminding myself, I'm a beginner. Nobody knows how to use this perfectly. So I'm just trying, really. Absolutely.
Okay. And it'll be interesting, I guess, in the space that you've come from in terms of M&A, right? Because I guess when you're doing integrations at the volume that you've done them, you kind of want a repeatable playbook, so to speak. How much of an influence do you think AI will have on that?
A limitless influence, I would say. I think with AI, what's fantastic in M&A is how much due diligence effort can be conserved on actually analysing them. It comes back to that discernment. I spent a lot of time before AI just reading through lots and lots of documents and working out what all the terms and conditions are. And I think AI really helps to simplify that process. Of course, I can't just blindly put a handbook into AI and tell me what's important. But I do find that it's cut down on a lot of the non-value add tasks that I was doing in diligence, and it frees me up to think more about risks, long-term planning, rather than the spreadsheets of it all, if that makes sense. I think as well with AI, it's a really good opportunity for us to scale lessons learned at a scale that's much quicker than we were able to do before. I think you can then learn on all the context of all deals that have been done before, what worked, what didn't work, and you can help build that into your model going forward. So for me, I'm hoping AI will mean M&A deals are more successful going forwards. I think the majority of the places where I've seen M&A fall down has been in the cultural side of things. And I think what AI can be good at doing is taking sentiments and telling you what are the blind spots here. How can we read between these lines much quicker than you could by just reading it yourself?
Interesting. Okay. And then this is a topic that I always find super interesting. I think it pretty much sits in your world as well, because we often talk about AI and how that's going to affect recruitment processes. But if you couple them together, AI and neurodiversity, what's your thoughts on the two coupled together and the way recruitment processes are done now, where you've got people doing CVs with AI, companies are sifting through CVs utilizing AI, and then you're getting a auto rejection or an acceptance. Again, AI. There's not really any human intervention within that process. So how do you think that's going to affect things moving forward for neurodivergent people?
I think it gives a bit of an opportunity in a way, because when you know that these systems are doing this work, it means that you can almost ask that system what you're missing too, and so you can show up a little bit better. But I think as it affects any type of difference, AI could mean that certain nuances that you might be able to read better in person get lost. But I think that impacts every facet of the world going forward. So it's not just recruitment processes, finance processes, IT processes, all of the processes, right? So I'm hoping that things will improve going forwards. But if I come to nuts and bolts of it, I'm just hoping that HR professionals are at the table when we're building these systems so we can think about bias. Because I think a lot of the times when I've seen bias show up, it's not been intentional. But then if it's not intentional, then it means that people aren't actively thinking about it.
Absolutely.
So I'm just hoping that HR stays around the table as we're implementing these systems. So there can be somebody who's actively thinking about bias, the future of work, neurodivergent people. I think in general, just thinking about neurodivergence, very few autistic people are actually in full-time employment. And a lot of the reason for that is because of the lack of accommodations and the lack of flexibility in the way that people show up, because people are used to professionalism looking one type of way. But we know when we talk about matters of diversity and inclusion that professionalism can look like lots of different things to lots of different people. So I'm just hoping over time the world wakes up to difference, not necessarily always being a bad thing. Difference can be a strength. And I find with very low accommodations, actually, a lot of neurodivergent people can thrive in these workspaces. So I'm just hoping someone's actively thinking about it. And again, it's not just HR's job. I think it's every single leader's job to be thinking about bias, the future of work, what the implications of the decisions that we're making in this moment might be in 10 years' time, 20 years' time.
Okay. And you mentioned people can thrive in low accommodating environments, right? You only found out 18 months ago.
Exactly.
And you're already doing fantastic in your career. So what's next for you? What does the next kind of like 5 years look like for you in terms of where you want to go with your career, what you want to do personally, etc.? Sounds like you're having a big impact in the space from a neurodiversity standpoint. What's next for Teru?
So right now it's a strategic pause and reset. So I'm actually on a career break right now.
Oh, fantastic.
I've just stepped away from a very demanding role, which is fantastic. I learned so much. I became a better leader for having walked that journey. But my dad actually is retiring and he's going to be relocating to a whole different continent. So right now I'm just trying to spend as much time as possible with my family before there's a flight in between us. It's just a train right now. And just to help them with that transition too. I think what's been really nice about this time is just seeing how human change can be. Like my dad's going through a change and I can see his emotions. I can see the change journey that he's going on. Yeah. And I'm finding I'm using some of the skills that I've learned in my career to help him with that and navigate things like international estates and property deeds and writing a will and the emotion that comes with thinking about the transition from being alive to not being alive anymore. So for me, it's family time for now. Absolutely. And then leaping into whatever that next opportunity might look like. I think I'm not really a person that likes to put too much of a limit on what I'm going to do in 5 years' time, because I always say, I think that my potential is much bigger than my imagination. Even the role that I just came into, when I first started my career, I didn't even know that kind of role could exist for me. Yeah. So I kind of don't really want to limit what happens in the next 5 years based on what I know now. And I also think AI is fundamentally reshaping the world of work. It's reshaping what jobs are, what they ask of you. So let's see. I'm hoping, though, I will continue to learn. I will continue to be able to collaborate. And I will continue to be able to deliver value for whatever it is that I'm doing. And finally, I just hope that I'm really, really happy in the next 5 years.
Absolutely. And have you found that you were able to switch off, because corporate role, like you rightly said, quite a demanding global role. Were you able to switch off, as in when you walked out the office or when you closed the laptop? Were you able to kind of switch off, or was there always that kind of like work mode?
It took in the back of your head? Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'd say it took a while. It took me probably about 2 weeks to realise, oh wait, there is no Teams meeting to join.
Yeah.
And I've always been somebody that really tries to actively switch off, because I think, and this is another thing that's mentioned in this book, Fortitude, as well, recovery is just as important when it comes to being a high performer. Throughout my whole career, I've always tried to make sure that I am truly resting when I'm not at work. So it's not something that was new for me or that I hadn't practiced before, but I think it always takes a minute to be able to properly switch off. And what's been really nice for me in this time is being able to reflect and take stock of the journey that I've walked. I think I've had my foot firmly pressed on the accelerator in my career. It took me 8 years and 10 months to go from a fresh graduate to a director at a Fortune 500 company it's a journey I'm incredibly proud of, but I also recognise I've just been running so fast. It's been nice to just take a pause and realise how different a person I am now than when I first started my career too. So yeah, it's been nice to rest. It's been nice to have family time, and I'm excited for what that next opportunity is going to look like for me.
Absolutely. Now I'm going to play devil's advocate. So I have no doubt that you're super excited about this time that you're going to be able to spend with your family and take a break and refresh, etc. But I do think high performance and the way an individual is wired kind of go hand in hand. Do you think you're going to get bored?
Absolutely. Yes. And I'm looking forward to that day. I think boredom isn't necessarily a bad thing. Boredom isn't something that I have as much experience sitting with. I think when I was a child, so the generation that I'm in, so I'm on the millennial Gen Z cusp a little bit.
Okay.
I'm a very young millennial. I was very lucky to be both offline and online. And I think one of the reflections that I've had in this time is how rare it is for me to actually feel bored and to sit with boredom. So I'm also excited to see what boredom might show me and reveal to me about myself too. But absolutely, I'm very much a person that likes a challenge. I'm motivated by challenge. That's why my career has looked the way that it has. So yeah, I think boredom will be coming for me quicker than I imagine.
No, absolutely. You've got some really good perspective on things, right? It's almost like you kind of take a step back or zoom out, as they say. It's nice. It's really nice to hear. And hobbies? What do you get up to in your spare time? What will you do a lot more of?
I have so many hobbies. So I've just started cycling.
Nice.
So I've been cycling around different cities, which has been nice. I was just in New York about a week and a half ago. Cycling around New York was incredible. I've also just been reading a lot of physical books. I'm dyslexic, so I listen to a lot of audio books whilst managing around a demanding job. So it's been nice to dive into actual reading physical books again, because I read slower than I listen. What else have I been getting into? I've been getting into cooking, so I'm trying to master a lot of Nigerian recipes. So me and my mum have been cooking together, and I've been noting down some of our family recipes too, which has been really lovely. And whatever else I might come across, I guess, too. Absolutely.
Okay. And just in terms of, again, just going back to that kind of like perspective and how you see things, it seems like you're able to kind of like compartmentalize and almost, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. You see the positive in everything. It certainly sounds that way. You're definitely, it's certainly coming across as glass half full. How much do you think that has helped you just in terms of kind of like leading some of these big global corporate complex transformations where sometimes they can be pretty high pressure? You've got difficult stakeholders, you've got geographical nuances in terms of culture, etc. How much do you think that's helped you kind of like lead transformation from the front?
I think being in a good mood does a lot for people. I can't say I'm always in a good mood and I'm always smiley, but I think my positive outlook and disposition does a lot in diffusing the tension in rooms that I walk into as well. And I'm always talking about duality. So yes, I'm a very positive, bubbly person, but on the other side of that is having lent into some of the challenges and the darker sides of things as well. So I think positivity overall is something that people don't often see enough of in the workplace. I think sometimes we lean into how empty the glass is a lot. And I find that just putting language to, hey, on the other side of that emptiness is a glass half full of water, can be a nice diffuser of tension in a room sometimes. It's not to say that you don't see the negatives or you don't see the challenges, but I think reminding people that strengths are present, positives are present, I think does a lot in helping navigate those really tricky moments. And I think as well with difficult stakeholders too, it's understanding the why. Oftentimes I've found in my career, when somebody's a little bit tricky, it's because they've had a whole context of disappointment, that they've believed in things and they've been let down time and time and time again. So what I try to do, you can't do it 100% of the time, is tell people what I can tell them and try and make sure that that doesn't change. I find in M&A in particular, when your words and your actions match, people trust you. That's not to say though that things don't change and that curveballs don't come in, but I try to tell people what I can tell them and try and make sure that the things that I tell them are true and they stay true throughout, because people feel safe in a situation of consistency. I don't think that there are many people that can't tolerate uncertainty at all, but when they can trust that the words that you say will match what actually happens, it goes a long way in rebuilding some of the trust. Like I've mentioned, those people that have been let down time and time again. Well, if you can actually walk your talk this time, it helps them to believe going forwards.
Absolutely. And then how important is the kind of like broader team culture, if you like? You as a leader, of course, you're setting the bar from a positivity standpoint, capability, been there, kind of done it, seen it, won the t-shirt type thing. But in terms of like the actual team or the program team, however it's kind of like set up, because we often hear about things breaking down based on the talent within a team or an organization, etc. How important is that for you when you're kind of looking at your team, that the culture is pretty similar to what you're saying?
I think it's very important, but I think culture can be changed, and it doesn't have to be too tricky to change it either. I think when you give people enough context, you give people the right tools, you explain to them what the benefit is for them, most people with those three things can go and fly. And I think oftentimes when cultures aren't great, we act like it's something that we can't change or that we can't lean into. I think when you work out the why of something, you can always do something about it. I think throughout my career, I haven't ever seen something impossible. Everything that we've set out to do has been possible to deliver. And I think reminding people of that fact goes a long way. And culture is built based on what people actually do, not what they say they do. So if we're trying to change the culture, then we all have to commit to, again, change as a verb, doing something differently, behaving differently, rewarding different things, and not having tolerance for other things. That's how I think you build and you maintain and change a culture.
Fantastic. So, last question from me. There's been some fantastic insight. Really enjoyed this conversation with you. Three things for anybody who's listening. Three things that you think go a long way to a successful integration. Or the three most important things, should I say?
Okay, so the three most important things are, number one, understanding the why and being able to articulate that why. And I think everybody around the table being able to do that's really important. So it's not just the leaders having the talking points, it's about the mid-level leaders having the talking points. It's about every single employee understanding why we're doing this, what it's going to mean for you. I think the second thing is to not pretend that people aren't human beings. So to me, that means not being afraid of emotions. Everybody is a human being at work with fears, with hopes, with dreams, and leaning into what they might be scared of and actually mapping it out in detail helps you to remove some of those fears, because sometimes what people are afraid of are things that will never come to fruition, or they are things that will happen, and you can explain to them what it's going to look like, feel like, smell like, taste like. And then when they're walking that journey, it doesn't feel as scary anymore. And I think the third most important thing is to try and not burn out. So very intense work is very intense. And I think too often times people talk about resilience as an individual venture, but actually resilience, the culture around you impacts your resilience. Your environment impacts your resilience.
Sure.
And I think all of us as leaders and as people need to be thinking about, what kind of environment am I creating? What kind of environment am I contributing to continuing? What am I not letting go of? What am I scared of? And I think leaning into that with all of those three things leads to a positive transformation.
Fantastic.
Pleasure.
Been very enjoyable. Do you know what? I think whilst we're obviously talking about kind of like business transformation, HR transformation, etc., and that's the reason why the podcast was initially thought about and why we're doing it. I think transformation of self is just as important, right? And I think you've given some fantastic perspective. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Me too.
And it's great to see your books as well. I'm hoping I can slide a few in my bag, but no, honestly, really enjoyed having you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.